from Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Please be seated.
Good morning, church. If you're visiting with us, we're really glad that you have chosen to be with us today. A couple of announcements I need to make before we get underway. There's a sign-up sheet in the back. We need some food for Friday night. The singing is the 24th this Friday. And for Saturday, the 25th, the celebration of Jeannie and Jerry Sanders' mother. There are 2 sign-up sheets in the back in the foyer if you would please fill out and help with those events. Also, Wayne Clark's class, a life group, will be meeting at our house tomorrow night. Some of you have asked if I would teach the book of Revelation, and I never seem to have the time, but I'm going to start on April 6th. At 6:30, which is a Thursday, 6 is a Thursday night. So we're going to try. If you're interested in that, please let me know. I grew up in a time in an American culture where no one wanted to be strange or weird. Normal was cool, weird was uncool. Normal people were winners. They were on their way up. Weird people were from some far, far away place. When the Beatles hit town, most of my peers rebelled. Not all. I remember when a guy started to wear his hair in the style of the Beatles. You know, you put a bowl over their head and cut it off. And anyway, a bunch of us kids had PE the last period. And we were getting ready to go over and to work on our animals for the show, for the fair. So some of us I brought my clippers that day and put them in the, when we dressed out, we went on, we showered and dressed back in. It was like nobody said anything, but it was like everybody could read each other's minds. 3 of the guys grabbed him, I grabbed my shears, and I went, what, and his hair was on the floor, and we left him in a pile of hair saying, that's what you get for not being normal. We rarely thought about or contemplated serious issues of life. That is until one of the more serious issues hit us in the face. All of us cool wannabes were shaken when one of our classmates, after a storm like this, was killed. It was a time when the logs came down the river and you could walk all the way across Lake Success on the logs. None of us had been swimming in a while, and there was this narrow passage above Springville. We called it the chute. You could just sit in there and the water was moving fast and you went about 20 feet and blasted into this pool of water. I don't know why, but Eddie and a friend went to go down it that day. And he got in the chute, and what he didn't know that about 2.5 feet below the water was a log sideways. And he hit that log and wrapped his chest around it. It took, one of the frogmen broke his leg trying to get him out. We tried to shut off the rivers about 3 days just to get him out. And suddenly, normal didn't seem so normal anymore. Eddie's death was sudden. It was unexpected and permanent. I mean, he was 17 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. Smart, funny. Now he has some kind of a grip on eternal life. Something my normal friends and I tried our very best to not think about. The entire school was let out. I remember attending his funeral, sitting in the back of a Catholic church. At that time, everyone in America had been to a funeral, but not everyone had been to a funeral of a fellow classmate 17 years old. What we'd worked so hard to avoid was now front and center. Things didn't matter too much anymore. Scholastics, class, sports. For the next week, that just kind of went away. But this was only the beginning. My normal thinking started to bother me. Kind of like a dull toothache that begins to get worse and worse. The idea of normal seemed to increase. For years, I'd been asked, what are you going to take? What classes are you going to get ready for the university? Are you going to take a foreign language to get prepared? None of that seemed important. I kept asking, what am I doing here? What if I'd been the one to go down the chute first? Would it matter? Would anybody care? Would I make any difference? We felt unsettled. But a bunch of us boys from the church decided we would do more Bible reading than we'd done in the past. I mean, we'd always done Bible reading and had these books and filled in the blanks. But now we began to read, and I have to tell you, my motivation for reading was my newfound fear and anxiety. I thought, is this what normal people do in life? Do they go around, thinking about the end of life and the meaning of every day? So a couple of our peers, we started reading the Bible, and we'd talk about it. Talk about it at school. We knew to avoid the Old Testament. We'd been down that read through the Bible in a year. And we'd do really good through Genesis and Exodus. When we got through Leviticus, it was like we were in quicksand. So we knew to skip all of that. So we started reading in the New Testament. Our prayer life changed. We didn't use the terms guard, guide, and direct us, but it was the same for us. We said, Lord, keep us safe. And when I think about the times we'd read in Leviticus, it wasn't all the rules and regulations that bothered us. It's how do you keep up with them? And does that have any meaning? Is there a purpose for that for me today? We had a non-church friend who joined our discussions. This new Bible reading friend took it serious. That seemed strange to me. He said the more he read, the more he felt like God was talking to him. And he looked at me and I didn't know how to respond. I just said, well, that's good. Every few days we discussed something we didn't understand. And it was like our reading was going to foreshadow things that were even more bizarre to us. Our unchurched friend named Bobby started to warm up to God. Maybe God's word, I thought, maybe this word is bigger and more powerful than I thought. Bobby said stuff like, well, I'm a Catholic and I never thought about God before, but what if all this stuff is real? There weren't a lot of choices of Bibles in that day, but we all had a Bible alike, and it had red letters. I mean, those of us growing up in the church, we'd understood that all of the things in the Bible, well, not all the things in the Bible, not the Old Testament. We didn't read the Old Testament, but all the things in the New Testament, all the words, even those not in red, were equally important. But I had to admit that the red words did catch my attention. And when I was reading the words in red, it seemed anything but normal, strange. In fact, Weird would have described it. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Someone strikes you on one cheek, turn the other. Normal says to hate your enemy, but Jesus says to love them. Normal seeks revenge on those who hurt, but Jesus said, let me show you something that's different. Robert commented, for all of us, this was unlike anything we'd experienced on the playground from the early days, first grade and on. These were not the most challenging red words. Jesus said, pray for those who persecute you. And if we try really, really hard to save our souls, we found out that we'd lose our souls. And then there was this passage, if we don't hate our parents, we really aren't committed to Jesus. Just really over the top. Then one day we got to reading and we hit a brick wall. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Those words spoke the most to us. It said that there was a big, wide road where you could travel fast and you didn't have to look to the left or right. You could just go pedal to the metal. But there was another road. And I wondered, where was I? Am I going with the flow that's just blindly on the wrong highway, or am I headed in a direction where the road is more challenging to find and navigate? I always assumed I knew where I was. But about this time, I felt like I was stuck in traffic. Bobby said, these words were like a neon sign. Neon signs were new. You have to understand the day. When it finally sank into me that the people on this super highway, the majority of them traveling, were normal. Normal ones choosing the wrong words. Normal one making wrong choices about people, making the wrong choices about how to spend money, like the 200 records that I had. Only a few weird people would get off of the normal highway, would do some soul searching and find out the real meaning of life. One day, Bobby said, the group, I need to make a U-turn. First, we didn't understand, and then he said, I want to commit my life to the one who wrote the red letters. His baptism was a vivid reminder that we all knew we'd been cruising down the path at another speed, and we were headed not in the right direction. We knew nothing about GPS. It hadn't been invented, but those red words were giving us direction. We came to understand that following Jesus meant we had different friends from the majority of our friends. It was strange to be different when we'd committed so much of our life to being normal. Another thing, I'd always associated weird with TV Christians. They were the ones then on the low-budget TV late at night, the ones who pronounced Jesus, Jesus. No cable, just a signal. Sometimes it was there and sometimes it wasn't. They wore strange colored clothes, promising you Jesus if you just send them in a monthly contribution. I realized later it wasn't that kind of weird that God was calling us to. I was forced to totally rethink weird. It being the Christian kind of weird didn't mean that I was a bad freak show carnival barking weird. What if the Bible was talking about a good weird? Although I'd always believed in God, I had to acknowledge I didn't know him. I knew nothing of his majesty, of his holiness, of his awesomeness. I did not know any of that. I did not know what it meant to follow him. It took a while for our peers at school to notice the change. When they did, they looked at us something like between looking at a wild animal and a crazy person. We quickly realized, or they did, that we weren't dangerous. We were just really weird. Today, some of our school peers would have said we've been drinking some bad Kool-Aid. We didn't know it at the time, but there was a pool, a money pool, and some of them taken a bet that we wouldn't last 6 months. They lost their money. Not because it was easy, because every day was a challenge. All of us began to be more cool with the idea of being a kind of God weird. Several of us went to the same university together. Most of them kept their majors. In school, I always wanted to be a veterinarian. I grew up on a farm, and I knew I didn't want to be a farmer, but I liked animals, and I thought, I want to be a veterinarian. But all these Bible classes that I was introduced to had that impact on my life. I began to study words and concepts, and I even began to look in that strange old weird book called the Old Testament. So at the end of the first year, I changed my major to a Bible major and a biblical language minor. The rest is history. Jerry White, the story. I've seen a lot of normal people in my life. I see normal people today that sort of just seem to fall into being normal. And I see others that work really hard to stay normal. Everywhere you go in our crazy world today, our evil world, people still want to fit in, even if it's their small circle that they're fitting in, and they'd like you to be in that circle. They want to belong to something they consider normal. However, normal today is not as easy and painless as it once seemed to be. It's more time consuming. There aren't enough hours in the day to buy, sell, cook, clean, call, shop, eat, plan, study, write, review, schedule, use the right pronouns, and still appear to be woke. Overwhelmed, overloaded, exhausted. Everybody said, what I need is more time. And we ask them, well, what do you want to use the time for? Well, it's to catch up on what they're already doing. Rushing, planning, worrying, rushing. Families suffer, health declines, priority fades, joy evaporates. See, the greatest tragedy of all is that most people don't know that there's two roads. The paper said this morning that over 50% of the people don't believe in Jesus. Parents are busy. They're stressed. Their kids get busy and they get stressed. It would really be great if parents had the time to sit down and have a meaningful conversation with their children and shared experiences. But normal families today, that doesn't work that way. There's nothing more normal than sex, right? Premarital sex, extramarital sex, friends with benefits sex, experimentation, casual hookups, whatever feels right between consenting adults, it's considered our normal. I mean, maybe our parents and our grandparents were hung up, but we're not. The 21st century, why would anyone in the world want to remain a virgin until marriage? After all, my peers used to say, well, you wouldn't buy a car without trying it out first, would you? Unfortunately, though, that kind of normal carries a huge price tag. Guilt, shame, confusion, remorse, disease, addiction, unwanted children, and divorce. Normal affects our faith, both in what we believe and how we live it out. When you consider people who relate to God, it's either normal to just reject God outright altogether, or if you believe in him, that it's okay to live in such a way as though he didn't exist. In churches, it can mean just being lukewarm, shallow faith. I'd like to be passionate. I'd like to feel passionate, but I don't. I'd like to say Jesus is the first and most important thing in my life, but my life tells me that's not the case. God has become a means to an end. He's a tool in our toolbox to accomplish what I want to accomplish. The majority of our people in America don't know God. And those that do, their actions deny the statement. And all this is normal, church, but normal isn't working. And I'm going to finish up this way. If you should decide to choose Jesus, if you should decide not to go on full speed on an open road, but you want to blaze a trail with Jesus as your guide, then you'll never settle for normal again. You'll only want one thing. You'll only be satisfied with one thing. There's only one thing that will meet your needs: the God that encourages the weird. We're going to sing a song of invitation. If you need it and we can help you, let us know while we stand and sing.